This is an introductory video about the Trinity of American Modern Architecture. The Trinity of American Modern Architecture are H. Richardson, Louis Sullivan, and Frank Lloyd Wright. Henry Hobson Richardson, The Rise of Modern Architecture, born in 1838 and died in 1886, at the age of 47. He was active in Albany, Boston, Buffalo, Chicago, Hartford, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and other cities. He is the architect associated with the style, Richardsonian Romanesque. The aesthetic comes from the honest expression of the spaces, materials, structure. Richardsonian Romanesque is a style of Romanesque revival architecture named after the architect himself, whose masterpiece is Trinity Church, in Boston, 1872 to 1877. Here you can see how Richardson is using similar geometric shapes of the Romanesque styles. On the right you can see Abbey Church of Saint Foy in France. On the left is Trinity Church. Here you can see the similarities and his love of Romanesque style. It emphasizes clear, strong picturesque massing, round-headed Romanesque arches, often springing from clusters of short squat columns, recessed entrances, richly varied rustication, blank stretches of walling contrasting with bands of windows, and cylindrical towers with conical caps embedded in the walling. On the right is Abbey Church floor plan, and on the left is Trinity Church floor plan. You can see how similar the floor plan is, and how Richardson used basic geometric shapes, circles, rectangles, etc., and divided the spaces similarly, using the cross shape in the design of the churches. Here you see the Crane Memorial Public Library, in Quincy, Massachusetts, built in 1880. In this building, Richardson used abstract geometric forms for designing this building, emphasizing on the idea that the aesthetic comes from an honest expression of the spaces, materials, and structure. The general form of the building is simplified to one comprehensive shape with a minimum of elements, each of which articulates a particular interior function: window wall for reading room to the right, entrance arch, tower for a staircase leading to offices behind the second-story gable, and raised windows in the stack room to the left. Horizontal lines and bands of brownstone organize the composition. The walls are a continuous textured surface of quarry-faced granite and brownstone, creating a visual continuity as do the textured shingles in the houses. The next building is Marshall Field Warehouse by H. Richardson in Chicago, Illinois, built in 1887. Richardson way of dividing the building into three categories: the base, the first level of the building, the main floors of the building. You can see how he used arches here for the main floors to stretch the building and emphasize on its scale. Split into 5 levels. The cornice, which is the top part of the building, and here is where Richardson stores most of the mechanical equipment, and with a stretch to get a 7-story building. Unfortunately, Richardson died in 1886 at age 47 of Bright's disease. Continuing his legacy, the second architect of the Trinity, Louis Sullivan, Louis Henry Sullivan, born in 1856, died in 1924, at the age of 67. He was active in Chicago, Manhattan, Wisconsin, Algona, Iowa, Newark, Ohio, Mississippi, Minnesota. He is considered by many as the creator of the modern skyscraper, was an influential architect and critic of the Chicago School, was a mentor to Frank Lloyd Wright, and an inspiration to the Chicago group of architects who have come to be known as the Prairie School. The saying, "form follows function," is attributed to him, although he credited the origin of the concept to an ancient Roman architect. In 1879, Dankmer Adler hired Sullivan. A year later, Sullivan became a partner in the firm. This marked the beginning of Sullivan's most productive years. This is the Auditorium building by Adler and Sullivan in Chicago, Illinois, built in 1889, inspired by Richardson. Or, was the idea of the skyscraper stolen? They were searching for a way to stretch the building and make it taller, so he used Richardson's way of dividing the building into 3 categories: base, shaft, and cornice. Eventually, they admitted that it cannot be stretched with this method. At the top of this building you can see Adler and Sullivan's offices, and this is also where Frank Lloyd Wright worked at the time. He was working for Louis Sullivan and he drew the interior drawings for this building. Fun fact, on the left, Marshall Field Warehouse, designed by H. Richardson, is where Sullivan worked, and on the right is Auditorium building designed by Louis Sullivan, where Frank Lloyd Wright worked. Sullivan was following Richardson's steps into designing skyscrapers. Richardson was designing the buildings tall. Sullivan at this point, after designing Wainwright, started adding the frosting on the building and focused on the ornament. The 3-part Sullivan skyscraper was used for this building: the base, the repeated identical shaft, the cornice, treating the building as a Roman column, the 5 steps of Sullivan skyscraper, the basement, where he placed machinery or mechanical equipment, the entrance and public spaces, like banks, small stores, CVS, the second floor, offices visited by the public, like a dentist office, the repeated identical floors, usually residential, like hotels or apartments, the cornice, which hides the machinery in the roof such as elevators machinery. On the right, Wainwright Building, also known as the Wainwright State Office Building, in St. Louis, built in 1891 in Missouri, designed by Dankmer Adler and Louis Sullivan. On the left, the Price Tower is a 19-story, 221-foot-high tower in Oklahoma. It was built in 1956 to a design by Frank Lloyd Wright. This is the part nobody sees, so Sullivan made it plain brick and Wright told him that the aesthetic should come from the spaces, the structure and materials. It should grow from the inside out. Frank Lloyd Wright was the project architect for this building, and he objected to this aesthetic. The Price Tower eventually was a reaction to this building, where Wright went back to the Richardson way of thinking developed by his mentor's aesthetics and let the structure design how the building looks like on the outside. Speaking of Wright, he was the third of the Trinity of American modern architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright, born in 1867 and died in 1959 at the age of 91. Buildings: Falling Water, Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, Johnson Wax Headquarters, Robbie House, Imperial Hotel, Unity Temple and many more. The man who built America. He also adopted form follows function as he was the student of Louis Sullivan. He was the father of organic architecture, which is today considered as modern architecture. Falling Water. This is the most famous building that put him on the spot for his career and after. The house was built partly over a waterfall, on Bear Run in the Mill Run section of Stewart Township, Fayette County, Pennsylvania, located in the Laurel Highlands of the Allegheny. Wright's passion for Japanese architecture was strongly reflected in the design of Falling Water, particularly in the importance of interpenetrating exterior and interior spaces and the strong emphasis placed on harmony between man and nature. Robbie House, the greatest example of the Prairie School style, the first architectural style considered uniquely American, located on the campus of the University of Chicago, in the South Side neighborhood of Hyde Park in Chicago, Illinois. The design of the arc glass windows is an abstract pattern of colored and clear glass using Wright's favorite 30 and 60-degree angles. The exterior of the house is Roman brick that runs continuous lines of horizontal color and minimizes the appearance of individual bricks. The last building is the Johnson Wax Building. Johnson Wax Headquarters is the world headquarters and administration building of S.C. Johnson & Son in Racine, Wisconsin. Designed by Frank Lloyd Wright for the company's president, Herbert F. Yip Johnson. The building was constructed from 1936 to 1939.
For Wright, by 1936, the car was part of architecture and conditioned space and movement. Still in your car, but already in the heart of the building. The garage ceilings are low, like a cave with its light sources and mysterious outlines. The pedestrians, if there are any in this futuristic world, would have to use the parking area to attain the sole entrance that is located within the building itself. An obligatory and narrow passageway. You have to slow down.
These three architects were the birth of modern American architecture. Thank you for watching.